You know, I was drafting my fantasy football team a couple of days ago this past weekend, and I was really surprised when I saw somebody draft Anthony Richardson in round five. And that's not my first time seeing Anthony Richardson getting drafted that high. I saw Anthony Richardson get drafted as a QB6 in one league after Lamar and Justin Fields went off the board. Like, a lot of people are really overvaluing Anthony Richardson in fantasy football this year. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is going to be terrible. All I'm saying is that if you're going into this season with Anthony Richardson being your QB1 in fantasy football, you are playing a really, really risky game. You are. You're playing a more risky game than what I was with Jameis Winston being my starting quarterback in fantasy football for the last couple of years. And this is coming from somebody who had to start Lamar Jackson his rookie season. And the thing with Anthony Richardson is that Anthony Richardson is going to have some good games where he ends up having some performances that just blow you away and they end up helping you win your fantasy football league that week. But also, he's going to have a couple of games where he's going to end up struggling and giving you less than 10 fantasy points. And then you're going to be screwed. And he can have way more of those performances where he has under 10 points than he has those performances where he ends up going off and give you like 25 to 30 plus. So I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is going to be a bad QB, because I know why a lot of people in the fantasy football community are taking Anthony Richardson this high, because you remember how good Justin Fields was in fantasy football last year. And we know that in real life, if you're not good, a lot of people are going to say you're not good. But in fantasy football, it's weird because a QB who may not be all that good in real life is good from a fantasy football standpoint. And Justin Fields, he wasn't a good passer, but when this dude decided to run the football, he was able to carry fantasy teams on his back. And this is coming from somebody who had Justin Fields. I was on the Justin Fields fantasy hype train before the season started last year. Now, it took him a while to get going, but that game that he had the first time they played the Lions, yeah, he was carrying. So I get why people are high on Anthony Richardson, because you're thinking that Anthony Richardson, although he's not a good passer, he'll be able to account for his lack of passing ability with his legs, and his legs can generate a good amount of fantasy points, especially when you couple that in with the rushing touchdowns. And plus, it's not like he's not going to throw no passing touchdowns, so you account that this is somebody who could go off, and if he ends up hitting right out the gate, he could end up being a winner in most fantasy football leagues. But the problem with Anthony Richardson is that a lot of people are just thinking about the highs that comes with him. A lot of people aren't really accounting for his lows, and his lows are really low. Like, you really could end up having some games where you end up getting 5 fantasy points out of Anthony Richardson, and that's very possible. Because I remember having Lamar Jackson his rookie season, and his passing not really being all that great. So it was like, man, like, you ever had your phone and you just refreshing your fantasy leagues, just swiping right and just checking on the scores while you watching the game. So I was watching Lamar Jackson one time. Man, this dude ain't get a fantasy football point until like midway through the second quarter, man. Like, it was just awful. Same thing with Jalen Hurts. Now, I didn't have Jalen Hurts last year, but I know a couple of people who did, and even when they had Jalen Hurts, it was like, man, like, watching Jalen Hurts kind of is a drag, because, like, the dude doesn't get a lot of passing yards. You got to account for his rushing ability. And I was like, yeah, but, you know, that's kind of been the trend in fantasy football. Like, those quarterbacks normally produce a lot of great numbers from a fantasy football standpoint, but the problem with getting a guy like Anthony Richardson is that his passing is probably not going to be all that great. And I'm not going to say he's not going to have any success at all, but what I am saying is that I think he's really going to be inconsistent this year. And I don't really think you want the kind of Anthony Richardson inconsistency as your QB1 in fantasy football if you're really trying to win your league. So let me know what you guys think about Anthony Richardson down in the comment section down below. Anthony Richardson, like I said, I don't have anything against Anthony Richardson. I think Anthony Richardson is going to have a really good rookie season. My only concern with Anthony Richardson is just, you know, his inconsistency. And I don't think that Anthony Richardson has a lot of experience And I think that his lack of experience probably is going to hurt him this year. But I don't think he's going to be garbage. Like, if you want to be risky and take that gamble with Anthony Richardson, go ahead. But I think that Anthony Richardson is going to have a lot of games that make you go, oh, man, like, what was I thinking drafting him this high? Like, Anthony Richardson is somebody you take a flyer on when you have a solid QB, and then maybe Anthony Richardson starts popping off and he can be consistent, then you go ahead and start him. But drafting him this early with training camp not even starting and not even seeing him in the preseason game is really risky to me.